I grew up in a small town, primarily Hispanic. Everyone knew everything. We had something here and there, of course, but other than that, not too much stuff happened. I'm overweight, to put it simply, and not to the standards of beauty, really. I remember reading a meme online once where it was a joke about, "Can't catch me or kidnap me since you can't carry me. Keep eating cake." I laughed at that. It was like so true. God, I didn't realize that would come back and bite me. I was 18 to 19, I believe, and it was nighttime. My weed plug was doing a stash and dash, and being broken and desperate, I went for it. I figured I grew up here. I know all the areas. What made this more tempting was that it was actually not far from my area at all. So I said it. I was on a video call with my boyfriend, and I told him I was going to go for it. He stayed on the phone with me as I headed out. Mind you, it's late, and the areas I had to cross through are not well lit. I left with nothing on me, not even my taser, alarm, and pepper spray that my dad always made me have. Oh, and to make things worse, I snuck out because I didn't want my dad to know I was hunting for weed, so this was already starting out great. I set off. I had to cross railroad tracks to get through to the area, which was pitch black. Only the main road in the distance was lighting it up, along with some lights from a warehouse nearby, but other than that, it was very hard to see. I made my way toward the main road and noticed a semi parked on the side of the road. Nothing unusual. Semis park there all the time. Ever since I was little, so nothing too weird. I then heard, "Hola, hey." I looked over and saw a man in a semi truck. He looked generic, I'm not going to lie. Hispanic with a red long sleeve. He looked like any other man I'd seen around town, but his smile, I don't know, he was just off. I waved, being polite. He gestured for me to come over and started speaking Spanish, but I don't know Spanish. I know what you're thinking. 1. Why don't you know Spanish if you grew up in a Hispanic town? And 2, why aren't you running? 1, my parents never taught me. So I just kept walking. I sheepishly responded, "I don't speak Spanish in Spanish." I learned that phrase just to say it to people. I waved him off quickly, walking away. My boyfriend asked me, "Who's that?" And I just told him, "It's some random semi-truck driver." I went on with the night. I think I'd been out for 40 minutes at this point, and I realized I wasn't going to find it. I was sad and started to head home, still on the phone with my boyfriend. I kept talking, and my phone was dying, which is actually what made my boyfriend tell me to go home. So I started walking back. I went down the road and looked down the pitch-black area where the railroad was, and I stopped. I just had a bad feeling. Something told me not to go home just yet. I told my boyfriend I was going to go look at the other end of the street that was toward where the warehouse was, giving off light, passing empty trailers partially hidden by the shadows. I started walking. I made it into the light, and I heard movement behind me. Then, hey. I turned around really quick and saw the same semi-truck driver with the same smile he had on. He came out from behind a trailer he had been hiding behind. He had his right hand tucked into his pocket and was positioning his body so that he was hiding whatever he had. He told me to come here and started getting closer to me. I immediately told my boyfriend to wake his dad up and come get me. I backed up quickly and was trying so hard to think. He saw me on the phone and immediately had a mad and annoyed look on his face. He stopped and actually started hiding behind the trailer more, so I booked it down the road, telling my boyfriend to come get me or have his dad come get me. I didn't want to call my dad because, even in this moment, for some reason, I was still terrified of getting caught sneaking out. I ran across to the main road to the little mini-mart across the street and hid behind an ice cream machine. I told my boyfriend I needed to call someone, and I hung up on him. I called my friend, who, thank God, was out with his girlfriend. I told him I was in danger and needed him to come get me. I told him where I was at. While I was waiting for them, I stayed behind the ice cream machine, and I saw the man's semi-truck. I saw him looking around for me, and then shake his head in disappointment before driving off. Even in that moment, I didn't feel safe, not until my friend pulled up. Everything hit me once he got out of the car, and I hugged him, crying. He and his girlfriend calmed me down and took me home. I got a bit of a lecture from my boyfriend, but I'd rather take the lecture than anything else. I was lucky, way too lucky. The false sense of security my weighted looks gave me really shattered after that, and I'm glad for it. It terrifies me to think of how things could have turned out. Could have turned out differently if I didn't have my boyfriend on the phone with me. So, semi-truck driver, let's not meet. I never want to see that smile ever again. 2 years ago, right around Halloween, I was babysitting for these two ladies who each have a son. They wanted to go out, so I stayed at one of their houses and watched their boys. It was around 8:00 p.m., and the boys were sitting on the couch playing on their iPads and whatnot when somebody knocked on the door. I asked them if anyone was supposed to come over, and they both said no. I went over and checked the peephole in the door, and it's some guy in a grey hoodie, deliberately hunched over so I can't see his face. Immediately, I'm like, nope, and I don't say anything and start pacing around because I don't want to give him any inclination we're inside. A couple of minutes later, I checked outside through the little window in the curtains, and he's gone. I didn't want to spook the kids anymore, and there weren't any more knocks, so I just kind of let it go, thinking of it as a prank. Fast forward a few hours later, and their moms get back. They ask me how everything was, and I say the kids were great, but somebody had come to the door. They asked me what time, and I said around 8. One of the mothers starts freaking out and goes through her phone. The other one tells me that right around that time, somebody had been making strange phone calls to them on a blocked number. They had disguised their voice and were saying things like, "I can see you through your window." They didn't think it was serious because it didn't make sense in the context of where they were, but in retrospect, we're almost positive it was me he was looking at through the window. They escorted me to my car, and I touched base later. Apparently, nothing strange ever happened after that, but I'm just really glad I didn't open that door because I have a feeling in my gut it would have been really bad. So this happened less than 30 minutes ago, and I immediately thought of this subreddit and wanted to see what you all thought. I'm a single female living alone on the 3rd floor of a row home in Philadelphia. The house has been modified into 3 separate apartment units, and I am on the top floor. I rent through a property management group, and a few days ago, they let me know that they'd be sending someone out to repitch my window AC unit, as it's been leaking and water was getting in through the window downstairs. It's an old building, more their problem than mine. Cool, no problem. They send out a guy whom I assume they have contracted, but is not necessarily a part of the property management group. He comes in, makes some light small talk with me about my 2 cats, and gets to work, nothing out of the ordinary. He finishes in about 15 minutes, lets me know he's done, and leaves my unit. About 2 minutes later, I hear him knock on my door again. I usher him to come in, and he proceeds to ask me if I have an extra key for the main door downstairs. I tell him that my neighbors, who I'm close friends with, have my only extra copy and that I only have one in my possession. He then proceeds to ask about nearby Home Depots and the like, questioning as to the closest place he can get a key copied. I ask him straight up if he's implying that I give him my key so that he can go make a copy, and he says yes, that the property management group asked him to ask me about it while he was there because they lost theirs. I politely told him that was not going to happen and suggested that he take it up with them if that's the case. I then called my property management company to confirm this information with them or to report the incident just in case. They never answer the phones, so I ended up leaving a voicemail and planned to follow up with an email as well. Small detail to add. I could have sworn I heard him messing with one of the doors downstairs after he left my unit the second time. The key to the main building is obviously different than the keys to get into each of our individual units, so having a key to the main door is only the first step. But being that I and the unit below me are single females living alone, I didn't like this one bit. This is weird, right? Or am I bugging? A quick update. My property management group answered the second time I called. My guess is that I was speaking to one of the leasing agents. She was pretty useless and sounded unbothered when I told her the story. She basically said she would follow up with the contractor, but that she didn't really know anything about the service order because this was not a property she personally managed. I planned to give the other tenants a heads up. In his defense, he did not give me any weird vibes prior to and even in his request. He sounded innocuous enough. However, and I don't know which door he was messing with, the downstairs or the main, but he was messing with one. I thought about popping out to ask him what he was doing, but instead, I opted to call my neighbor friend and loudly explain to her the situation that had just occurred, making sure to emphasize that I thought it was a bit weird and that I was calling the property management company to address the issue. Fact check. The Wollston in this place are thin. If I could hear him, he could definitely still hear me. This story dates back to spring 2016. At the time, I was in my late 20s. I was young and fit, with very long blonde hair. A total hippie chick who had quit her job to travel the US with my ex. At the time, pre-pandemic, before the van life/tiny hut movement really took off, we left our home in the Midwest in January of that year after holiday celebrations, saying goodbye to friends and family. By sometime in April or early May, we made it to southern Texas and decided to check out Padre Island National Seashore. For those of you unfamiliar with Padre Island, it's a seashore that you can drive right onto with your vehicle. My now ex and I were in a 26-foot Class C 1976 Chevy motorhome. We drove onto the island at nighttime, and waking up the next morning was the most insane and phenomenal experience. The ocean was a mere 15 feet away. I mean, the visual was so breathtaking I will never forget it. We arrived on a Thursday or Friday, and the beach was beyond packed. Another thing for people unfamiliar with Padre. It is where many Texas high schoolers and college kids mainly flock for their spring break. Spring break was just the week prior to when we got there, or maybe it was still going on. I don't know. Either way, it was busy, and we had an awesome weekend partying away. During this weekend, we noticed that workers for the park would often drive down the beach. They are very protective of their sea turtle population there and would slowly drive by in marked vehicles a few times a day. By Monday morning, we awoke to find the entire island emptied out. When I tell you we were literally the only ones, when you looked left or right, we were the only ones for what seemed like miles. It was a gorgeous morning, so I walked the dog quickly and then came inside to sit at our pop-up dining room table to do some journaling. My ex was asleep on the very back couch. We were backed in with the windshield facing the ocean, so of course, I took a seat looking towards the beautiful view. Maybe 15 minutes after I sat down to journal, a gray, beat-up pickup truck drove by kind of quickly, heading towards the direction of the park entrance. That was the first activity I'd seen on the island that morning, and I thought nothing of it. However, maybe 5 to 10 minutes later, the same truck came driving past our RV, this time much slower. The man driving the pickup was going so slow, in fact, that we made eye contact for several seconds as he went back by. He also seemed to drive closer to our vehicle in order to better see inside. Alarm bells should have been ringing at this point, but I just kind of shrugged it off. I was very much in my free spirit phase and was not easily put off. This is where it really gets creepy. Obviously, this guy needed to turn back around since he was driving away from the park entrance again, but I was honestly minding my own business. I kind of immediately put him out of my mind, but yes, several minutes later, maybe another 10, the man came back. But this time he pulled directly up to our RV with his truck, essentially nose to nose at a 45 degrees angle, maybe to appear as if he were giving a jump, not that far-fetched for a 70s vehicle on the salty beach. He was blocking us in. It was at this point my heart dropped and I began to get scared. I screamed my ex's name and he came immediately. He jumped up from the couch. I know he could hear the panic in my voice. I'll never forget how quickly he got up and how he had his arms spread across while he ducked down to see through the windshield. He was 6'5", very bearded, and I'm 100% sure the only reason the man in the grey beat-up truck sped off like a bat out of hell. It took several minutes for my heart rate to return to normal. My ex and I just looked at each other. That was the most unusual encounter on our trip. Surprisingly, we stayed another week after that in the same spot. The idea never entered my head that the man could bring reinforcements and come back for me or us. I was so very foolishly fearless and naive back then.